So what motivates us? Money, power, security? Whatever intermediate force drives us, the experts tell us that the dominant power of motivation is love. Even when driven by hate, these same experts say that hate is the absence of love. Religious thinking has always drawn upon the love of God as the main driving force for creation. The readings today deal with this belief. One frequently hears the accusation that religious thinking is of necessity governed by fear. Our first reading today from Deuteronomy tells us this is a fallacy. The first imperative given to the chosen people was to love the Lord your God. The exchange in Mark's gospel between Christ and the Jewish religious leader strikes a new note in religious practice. Meeting human need is shown as a deeper understanding of honoring God. Ritual observance is all good, but human need takes precedence. As the confrontation between Jesus and the Jewish religious leaders deepened, it became apparent that Jesus' concept of religious practice differed from his contemporaries. The Jewish leaders had great reverence for the law. For them, it was the way to honor God. Observance to the law was the absolute test of fidelity. That is why they insisted on the Sabbath rest. No work could be done on the Sabbath. Christ claimed that he had come not to destroy the law, but to perfect it, left them unimpressed. But for Jesus, the process for perfecting the law was to have it consider human needs, to have it accepted that meeting these needs represented a deeper way of fulfilling the law. Every Jew worth his salt knew the two commandments that to love God, your neighbor, and your neighbor. But what Christ did was he linked the two of them to show that they were fundamentally connected. A beautiful Christian ideal is to have before us is that Jesus is in the other person. Jesus is in the person next to me, the person in front of me, the person behind me, the person I live with and work with. One person in recent history who lived this is St. Teresa of Calcutta. When she was in a hospital in 1983, this was part of her meditation. Jesus is the hungry to be fed. Jesus is the thirsty to be satiated. Jesus is the naked to be clothed. Jesus is the homeless to be taken in. Jesus is the lonely to be loved. Jesus is the unwanted to be wanted. Jesus is the leper to wash his wounds. Jesus is the beggar to give him a smile. Jesus is the drunkard to listen to him. Jesus is the mental to protect him. Jesus is the little one to embrace him. Jesus is the blind to lead him. Jesus is the dumb to speak for him. Jesus is the crippled to walk with him. Jesus is the drug addict to befriend him. Jesus is the prostitute to remove from danger and befriend her. Jesus is the prisoner to be visited. Jesus is the old to be served. When St. Teresa accepted the Nobel Prize in Oslo in 1979, part of her acceptance speech went like this: "It is not enough for us to say, 'I love God, but I do not love my neighbor.' St. John says that you're a liar if you love God and you don't love your neighbor. How can you love God whom you do not see? If you do not love your neighbor whom you see, whom you touch, with whom you live. And so this is very important for us to realize that love, to be true, has to hurt. I found a little commentary on the summary of the 2 commandments that Jesus taught us. It is in the form of a poem. It goes like this: I sought my soul, but my soul I could not see. I sought my God, but my God eluded me. I sought my brother, and I found all 3. The 2 commandments of Jesus tells us to do what the Spirit of God tells us to do, to love one another and to love God. It tells us how. We can't bring up children properly unless we teach them the 2 commandments, to love God and our neighbor. And as the 2 commandments themselves teach, and as Jesus taught, we can't claim to love God if we do not love our neighbors. God is easily adored, but our neighbors, on the other hand, are not always so lovable. The law reminds us over and over again that we need to reach past that barrier, to love everyone as we love ourselves. This means most especially our enemies. If we would remain near to God, as the scribe was in today's gospel, then we need to keep these 2 commandments near to us, on our lips and in our hearts, because only in that way are we likely to avoid making the most human of mistakes. A mistake of thinking we're doing what is right when we're really doing what is wrong. But how can we love like this? Where will we get the power to love Jesus and others in this way? In a letter to the people of Albania in 1977, St. Teresa gives the key to being able to see Jesus in others. It is prayer. She wrote, to be able to love one another, we must pray much, for prayer gives a clean heart, and with a clean heart, we can see God in our neighbor. We do not think every time we are talking to someone, Jesus is in that person. In the parable in chapter 25 of St. Matthew's Gospel, the people did not think either of the presence of God in those around him. That is why in the parable, both those to the left of the Son of Man and those to the right say, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison? Because we do not always think like this, St. Teresa rightly said, if now we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten how to see God in one another. If each person saw God in his neighbor, do you think we would need guns or bombs? Thinking like this means thinking in a new way, putting on a new mind, letting our brains be washed with the gospel of Jesus. And as St. Teresa said, it's through prayer that we will receive the grace to see others with this new mind of Jesus. When we put on this new mind, the mind of Jesus, then his kingdom will be coming here to this world.